In an old factory, a group of dissatisfied workers start a movement in search of rights. They gather to talk to their boss, but their way is blocked by a battalion of security guards armed with truncheons. At first, they remain motionless, but when one of the workers throws a rock at the guards, a fierce fight breaks out. The confrontation is only interrupted when the boss, through a megaphone, asks two of the workers to come and talk to him. However, the leader of the movement, Sengaji, is not called and the chief demands that the others return home. They obey and, at nightfall, Sengaji returns home to find his wife and young son, called Sankeka. The boy doesn't understand why his father gets into these fights, but he replies that it's everyone's duty to fight the injustices of the world. The family then goes to bed, but first, Sankeka's mother asks the boy to close the windows because of the rain and, even though he's afraid of lightning, he obeys. 3 days pass and the workers summoned by the boss still haven't returned. Sengaji then gathers his colleagues again to find out what happened and, just as before, they find themselves facing armed guards and another battle begins. This time, however, one of Sengaji's own colleagues stabs him in the back, eliminating him. Sankeka, who had been following his father in hiding, sees everything and runs towards his body, but it's too late. A downpour begins and the boy, furious at this tragedy, grabs one of the guards' shields and tries to fight them off. However, Sankeka accidentally shoots an electric charge from his hands, hitting everyone around him and being thrown back by its immense power. After this event, a year passes with Sankeka and his mother having to support themselves. She receives a job offer in another city and has to go away for a day, but a week passes and Sankeka's mother hasn't returned. The boy is forced to fend for himself, facing hunger and his greatest fear, which is the lightning that comes with the rain. More days pass and, believing that his mother has abandoned him, Sankeka leaves home and tries his luck on the streets. One morning, however, he is chased by a gang of street kids, who surround him in an alleyway. Sankeka tries to defend himself, but is beaten by all 5 of them at once and they even cut his ear and intend to beat him with wooden logs. Fortunately, another boy, called Awang, shows up to help Sankeka and, with his martial arts skills, knocks the 5 of them out in one fell swoop. After the fight, Awang takes the boy to his hideout in a train station, feeds him and decides to teach him to fight, so that he can defend himself. Training begins, with Sankeka proving to be a skilled martial arts student. However, during the break, it rains again and the boy runs to hide inside one of the wagons. Awang asks why Sankeka is afraid of the rain and the boy says that he feels as if the lightning is attracted to him. Awang then invites him to go with him on a train to the southeast, where they can both have a better life. Sankeka accepts and, during the night, the two run after the train, which is leaving at high speed. Awang manages to reach one of the wagons and puts out his hand to catch Sankeka, but even though he runs as far as he can, the boy is left behind. As a final lesson, Awang advises him to use what he has learned to survive and not to trust anyone. Sankeka decides to put his advice into practice and, the next day, goes to look for work in a port so that he can support himself. While waiting in line, a street kid pushes him and takes his place, but this time, Sankeka strikes back with a spinning kick. However, the boy calls the rest of his gang and they run after Sankeka. Luckily, during his escape, he meets a couple in a car and they take him away. They promise to take care of him and give him a better life, but when he remembers Awang's advice, the boy runs out of the car and into the street. Several years have passed and Sankeka, now an adult, works as an electronics and security technician for a newspaper. His city is overrun by crime and vandalism, but he prefers not to interfere and just lives his life in isolation. Meanwhile, others are trying to fight crime, like the newly elected politician, Durga Utama. He goes to a dinner for legislators and there he meets Penkor, the head of organized crime who controls almost the entire city. According to rumors, Penkor, like Sankeka, had his father murdered unjustly and the criminals set fire to his house. Penkor survived, but his face was burned and he was taken by his uncle to an orphanage, so that he would never have access to his inheritance. There, Penkor and the other orphans were mistreated, but the boy used his intelligence to unite them in a rebellion. With the help of his colleagues, he eliminated the owners of the orphanage and soon rose in the world of crime, with all the country's orphans as his allies. He even comes to the legislators' dinner to meet the new politician, but Durga rejects him, saying he knows who he really is. Unfortunately, this turns out to be a bad idea and, when Durga is returning home with his family, he sees in the corridor that someone is watching him. Durga decides to investigate and is approached by a mysterious man, who invokes fire magic and puts him to sleep. Minutes later, Durga wakes up and finds himself in an abandoned building, gagged to a chair and with his wife and children tied to a rope. Suddenly, Penkor appears and tells him that, because of his disrespectful attitude, he will set an example for everyone. Durga begs for his family to be spared, but instead the crime boss starts setting fire to the rope, and when it breaks, his family is thrown out of the building. In the midst of his despair, the politician tries to rescue them and throws himself down to grab the rope, but also ends up falling and perishing, along with his loved ones. Far away, Sankeka wakes up in his bed, hearing the noise of a guy trying to break into the apartment next door. Once again, he prefers not to get involved in other people's problems and just gets ready for another day at work. At the end of the day, Sankeka talks to a friend who wants to leave the city and get away from all the violence. Speaking of which, a guy comes running towards the gates of the newspaper and asks for help, because a gang of hooligans wants to lynch him. Sankeka and his friend initially refuse to help, but his colleague, a gung, opens the door and promises to take him safely to the police station. Before leaving, the security guard tells Sankeka that this city will never change if people like him continue not to care about others. These words cause him to have a crisis of conscience, and, the next morning, he sees the vandals trying to break into the apartment again. They manage to get through the door and find a young woman called Woolen, who lives with her younger brother Teddy. The bandits threaten to eliminate them both, but Sankeka finally decides to intervene and attacks the men with punches and kicks. The criminals don't like this at all and advance on him, armed with knives. Even so, Sankeka uses what he has learned in martial arts to block the attacks, and, as soon as he takes down one of them, he moves on to a direct confrontation with the second criminal. However, as he struggles with him, the other gets up and prepares to attack him from behind. But, to his surprise, as he leaps towards Sankeka, Woolen pulls him up by his shirt and knocks him onto the table. Sankeka takes advantage of the help, knocks the other bandit off his partner and tells them both to get out of there. His skills impress Woolen and Teddy, but he soon leaves so as not to attract any more attention. Later, Sankeka is finishing another day as a security guard, but while he's watching the place with his flashlight, the two bandits come back looking for revenge. They have brought allies and, although the security guard manages to deal with a good part of the group, he is forced to flee when more of them show up. Finding himself outnumbered, Sankeka runs towards the huge newspaper presses and uses the cramped environment to his advantage. Even so, he can't avoid the whole gang, so he takes the fight to the rooftops. The thugs follow him and another confrontation breaks out, with punches and kicks being exchanged between Sankeka and the entire gang. Even with his martial arts skills, he is soon knocked down by the criminals, who begin to beat him mercilessly with their wooden clubs. Finally, with Sankeka powerless to fight, the gang threw his body off the roof. No ordinary human being could survive that fall, but just then, a heavy rain began to fall, and with it, several bolts of lightning began to strike Sankeka. Suddenly, he wakes up and begins to absorb the electrical discharges in his body, but all this energy causes him to lose consciousness. The next morning, he wakes up in his apartment, but it's not long before someone knocks on the door, and it's Woolen, who out of the blue asks him to look after her brother. Meanwhile, in the assembly, the politicians argue among themselves about Durga's perishment and suspect that Penkor was responsible. However, the crime boss himself appears on the scene and attests to his innocence, as well as warning everyone to be careful what they say. After that, Penkor leaves and his assistant, Gazul, says that the city's politicians could be a problem in the future. However, the crime boss has already put his plan into practice and, in a rice warehouse, his henchmen inject a mysterious serum into the sacks. Back at Sankeka's house, he tells Teddy that he will take him to his sister's because he has to work. On the way, he meets Woolen at the market, who is gathering other traders in a movement to demand more security. Sankeka then asks the young woman to take her brother back, but before she does, the same gang of thugs who threw him off the roof show up on the scene. They are surprised to see the security guard still alive and start chasing him through the city streets. Sankeka tries to escape, but is soon surrounded by them and forced to face them in another round. Once again, his combat skills enable him to take on several of them at once, blocking and countering their attacks very quickly. However, the bandits decide to put an end to this and throw axes at Sankeka, but he suddenly blocks them with lightning from his arms. He also manages to momentarily launch electrical discharges at his enemies, knocking them away. This surprises him, but when Sankeka tries to fire the rays again, nothing happens. So he grabs one of the bandits' wooden clubs, and with it, Sankeka manages to finish off the rest of the gang. The whole battle is seen by Woolen and the merchants, who are impressed by the security guard's skill, but Sankeka ignores them and leaves. Hours later, he is at work talking to a gung about what happened and says that, for a moment, he thought he had special powers. Soon afterwards, Woolen appears on the scene and asks Sankeka to return to the market, as everyone believes he is a hero and will defend the people of the city. Sankeka refuses, saying that he has no superpowers, but everyone notices that, as well as shooting lightning, he seems to have healed from the injuries sustained in the fight. Nevertheless, he refuses and Woolen and her colleagues leave, disappointed with Sankeka's attitude. Unfortunately, when the security guard finishes his work and returns home, he finds the market covered in flames and several shopkeepers injured. In the face of the people's despair, Woolen says that Sankeka cannot refuse to help the people in the face of injustice. She believes that the group of vandals who attacked them are the ones who caused all this and asks the security guard to help her fight their leader, Ganda, one of Penkor's servants. When he hears about this, Sankeka decides to do something about it, but he still doesn't know the origin of his powers or how to control them. Then, on another night at work, Woolen and Teddy go to talk to him, just as another rainstorm, full of thunder, begins to fall. This reminds Sankeka of his fear of lightning and how he absorbed it the night he was almost eliminated. Because of this, he walks into the rain and receives an electric charge, which sends him crashing to the ground. Agung rushes to help him, but as soon as he touches Sankeka, he is thrown away by a bolt of lightning. Finally, the security guard realizes that lightning is what gives him energy and Woolen takes the opportunity to test this by hitting him with an iron bar, but Sankeka feels no pain. With his energy recharged, he accompanies Woolen and her companions to a wedding party where they will meet Ganda. When they get there, the guy runs away when he sees the group and his henchmen try to protect him, but the bride of the wedding soon shows up wanting to know what's going on. However, before the conversation can continue, several of the guests start to feel ill. Coincidentally, they are all pregnant and it is soon reported that several women around the city, who are expecting their babies, began to feel ill at that very moment. The media then discover that this happened because of the rice contaminated by Penkor's henchmen. According to experts, a serum was injected that affects the brains of fetuses, making them unable to distinguish right from wrong. In this way, an immoral generation will be created, who will soon become Penkor's future followers. The news ends up inflaming the town's people and what follows is widespread confusion in the streets, with vandals taking the opportunity to destroy stores and break into houses. However, that same night, Sankeka appears, wearing a mask, and tries to stop the troublemakers. He manages to take them on without too much difficulty, but one of the thugs attacks him with a knife containing a reservoir and with it, the guy collects some of Sankeka's blood and leaves. After this fight, the security guard returns to his workplace, where Woolen is treating his injuries. Once again, a rainstorm begins and Sankeka takes the opportunity to recharge his batteries, but when he sees what happened to Agung, he realizes that, being energized, he could risk the lives of his friends. So, with the help of Woolen, Agung and Teddy, Sankeka takes everything he can find in the newspaper and puts together a protective suit. With it, the warrior sets off to confront more criminals and, on his mask, he has put antennae made of metal so that he can absorb the lightnings more easily. The masked vigilante's actions soon become news and attract the attention of the House of Peace, a secret organization made up of politicians and journalists. Among them is Ridwan, one of the legislators who proposes to investigate the immorality serum and discover the identity of the masked hero. Speaking of him, after a night of fighting, Sankeka wakes up on the sofa and sees Woolen making her breakfast. Little by little, the young woman seems to be getting attached to the hero and, after making the food, she leaves the room, but ends up being approached by a group of troublemakers. Sankeka rushes to help her, but the guys say they didn't come to fight, but to clarify that it wasn't them who set the market on fire. They say that it was Adi Suleiman, a famous violinist, who caused it, as they saw him in the market on the same night as the incident. Upon hearing this, Sankeka goes to the theater, where the violinist will be performing that evening. After the show, the musician leaves through the back door, but is approached by the masked hero, who demands to know why he set fire to the market. In response, the violinist pulls a blade from inside the violin stand and attacks Sankeka. Thanks to his superhuman stamina, he is unharmed and an intense fight begins. With his skill, Sankeka soon gets the upper hand in the fight and, during the struggle, he sees a strange mark on his opponent's chest. Seeing that he's no match for him, the violinist runs off down the road, but the man doesn't notice a car coming towards him and is violently run over by it. The next day, Penkor finds out about the perishment of the violinist, who was a member of the league formed by the most faithful orphans of his organization. He then plans to take revenge not only on the hero who eliminated his ally, but on everyone in the House of Peace. To do this, he summons the other 9 orphans of the league, entitled the dancer, the hypnotherapist, the nurse, the blacksmith, the painter, the student, the chef, the model, and the sculptor. Everyone heeds the call and, one by one, begins to eliminate the politicians and journalists who are part of the secret organization. One of the orphans, the dancer, who wears a mask on the back of his head, attacks Ridwan in his car and, despite the efforts of his security guards, they are all eliminated by him. Finally, he has to eliminate the legislator, who locks himself in his car to protect himself. The villain then advances towards him, but here comes Sankaka, wearing his costume and challenging the dancer to a direct confrontation. The hero's skill impresses his enemy, to the point where he has his mask removed by his opponent. Finally, Sankaka throws him away and, seeing that the hero was stronger than he thought, the orphan flees. Afterwards, Sankaka goes to check the mask and finds the same symbol that the violinist had tattooed on his chest, representing the League of Penkor. Ridwan thanks the hero, who flees the scene, but his heroic act motivates the legislator to vote for the production of antidotes against the immorality serum. The vote is passed and the antidote begins to be produced and distributed among all the residents. The problem is that the company responsible for this is a subsidiary of Penkor, and instead of an antidote, a substance will be used to potentiate the serum. However, Ridwan had ordered an analysis of the antidote from a private laboratory as a precaution and discovers Penkor's plan. He then sends his assistant to notify the vaccination posts and asks him to find out the location of the masked hero. After searching for him, he discovers his real identity and sends him the phone number of the place where he works. Ridwan quickly calls there and manages to speak to Sankaka, warning him about Penkor's evil plan. The hero decides to stop the villain, but he doesn't have to, as Penkor has already discovered his secret identity and appears in the newspaper, along with his League of Orphans. Dressed in his costume, Sankaka challenges them to a fight and confronts the model and the chef first. Even without his powers recharged, the hero confronts them both at the same time, managing to knock the model into a hole. But soon after, the sculptor appears with his tweezers and hammer, next to the painter, who uses his powerful fists as a weapon. These two soon prove to be more of a challenge than expected, and Sankaka finds it difficult to keep the fight going. To make matters worse, it's the student's turn to enter the fray, using her backpack as a combat hose, along with the blacksmith, armed with two long, sharp swords. Faced with his rivals with their long-range weapons, Sankaka tries to keep his distance, but is soon stopped by two more members of the League. The first, whom he has faced before, is the dancer, followed by the nurse, who uses daggers as a combat weapon. In the midst of so many enemies, the hero begins to feel exhausted and can barely stand. But he can't rest, because Wulin, Teddy and Agung are being taken to the roof by the villain. He rushes there and finds his friends taken hostage by Penkor and his orphans, including the hypnotherapist. Sankaka asks the villain to spare his friends, but without hesitation, the chef stabs Agung in the back. Before he perishes, the security guard tells him that Sankaka's strength has always been inside him and tells him to release it completely. This makes the hero even more motivated and, through his own body, he manages to absorb electricity from the skies, becoming more powerful than ever. Sankaka then calls all the orphans to face them at the same time, and one by one, he eliminates them with ease. However, when it's the hypnotherapist's turn, he invokes his magic to make the hero fall asleep. In his dreams, Sankaka sees himself in his old house, with his parents sitting on the sofa. They promise never to leave him again, but Sankaka soon realizes the deception and manages to return to reality, just in time to block the blacksmith's attack. He then grabs one of the blades and summons more lightning, causing the sword to shatter and a wave of energy to hit and eliminate the blacksmith and the hypnotherapist. Seeing that his allies have almost all been eliminated, Penkor tries to stab Sankaka in the back, but Ridwan appears on the roof and shoots the villain. In his last moments, Penkor sends his last orphan, the painter, fleeing, and tells him that his plan with the immorality serum will be completed. Sankaka, however, says that he will stop him and then sets off on his motorcycle in search of the car carrying the antidote. The hero manages to find him and pulls him over, but the driver pulls out a pistol and shoots him, causing him to fall off the bike. To the guy's misfortune, another mysterious heroine appears on the road and uses her scarf to stop the car, causing it to overturn on the highway. Thanks to this, Sankaka reaches the vehicle and summons a powerful bolt of lightning, which destroys not only the antidotes in the car, but also those in the vaccination center. The day was saved by him, but 3 women were still injected with the antidote and their babies will be born, according to Penkor's evil plans. At the same time, in a museum far away, Ganda is standing next to Gazul, who has his own hidden plans underneath. Gazul reveals that on the wall of the museum is the body of Ki Willowuk, a powerful ancient warrior. He planned to resurrect him and, with Ganda's help, broke through the wall and found his body, decapitated. However, Gazul had found his long-lost head and, by putting it back together with the blood collected from Sankaka by the knife, the warrior comes back to life. Ki Willowuk asks why Gazul has brought him back, and he says that the warrior's old enemy has returned. He still doesn't know his true identity, but that enemy is Gundala, the warrior of thunder. This legendary hero is none other than Sankaka, which explains his power to absorb and control lightning. Upon learning this, Ki Willowuk orders Gazul to gather his army, as the battle between the enemies of the past is about to begin. Days later, Sankeka appears on the rooftops of the city, now wearing an improved uniform made with Ridwan's help. He promises to protect his city from crime, without suspecting that he will soon face his greatest challenge, in the form of Ki Willowuk. Luckily, he has the help of the mysterious heroine, whose real identity is Shreya C. She watches Sankeka from afar and knows that, in the near future, she will have to ally herself with him to fight a powerful enemy. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.